Mitzvosecha, Mitzvas Vidui U'Teshuvah, the mitzvah of confession and Teshuvah. What have we learned so far? General thing that we're starting with is that for Teshuvah to do what it's supposed to do, for the process to process correctly, we have to process the process correctly. Meaning that when we are going to now embark on the mitzvah of Teshuvah, process of Teshuvah, how does that work? Number one, we have to have a zivas, abandoning sin. I will never do that again. What comes with that? I will never do that again has to be deep charata, remorse. I rue the day I ever did that. We have to have a deep emotional feeling that's going to keep us from ever doing that again. And also it shows full remorse of what we've done. Then we do vidui, which is confession, verbalize what we did wrong, and that's a positive commandment. It's not necessarily contingent upon there being a Beis HaMikdash or sacrifices or anything like that. A person to verbalize that affirms that I'm not going to go there again, that's going to strengthen us in our resolve to never go to that again. And also to acknowledge that God sees and hears everything is all part of the vidui, the confession process. From there, then we can have bakashas mechila of asking for forgiveness. If a person transgresses, their action creates a body and entity. The pleasure that was felt at the time of the transgression creates a soul and enlivening aspect. So we want to get rid of both of that. We have to cut off the nourishment it's getting, we want to destroy it, and we want to take back what was taken. Again, part of the process, processing correctly. Now that we understand what the basic steps of Teshuvah are, we're going to start seeing the mechanics of it. First, we have to understand that the mitzvahs are called mitzvahs Havaya. They're related to this name of Havaya. The name of Havaya is the name where the power of creation comes from. This name of Havaya creates the structure through which creation comes about. Basically, the 10 attributes through which God interacts with the world. When we do a mitzvah, it's considered an Isurusa del Tatzis, awakening from below. That us down here we initiate, and through our initiation below, God has an Isurusa del Ela. There's an awakening from above. So awakening below initiates to be an awakening from above, and God is like, oh great, I'm going to send down my divine light to you. So we draw down the divine light, divine energy that's going to feed and nourish the world, etc. This is the good, healthy, ecological, spiritual system at work. And then we also saw how different mitzvos, they're like clusters of grapes, and they relate to the different letters of the name of Havaya, and according to whatever light it draws down, whatever will it is, etc. So everything working correctly, we have the language of tamim tiyeh, mavalakecha, they should be perfect, complete with God, as in having the healthy, ecological, spiritual system. If a person does what they're not supposed to do, then that energy, that light that's being drawn down is going to end up going in the wrong direction. We ended up with the language of v'nekev shem Havaya creates a puncture, bleeding wound. That energy doesn't just dissipate, it goes somewhere else. The negative forces, the cockroaches come and take it. If this happens, it's a terrible situation for the godly light. It's like an exile. It's like taking the king's face and dragging it through a privy full of filth. And that feeds what was otherwise on life support. They come and they feed off of it. Which is why we have to sterilize the wound, stem the bleeding so we could heal the wound, and everything could go back to the way it's supposed to be. That's part of also why we see in the Gemara in Yuma it says that Teshuvah brings healing to the world. So it's not just that, Teshuvah is your process of rectification, it's a returning and reconnecting to God. It uses the language of healing. And we see how the language of healing fits in over here because we had a puncture. We have a bleeding wound. We have to heal them. We have to fix that. That brings us to the first time that we see the verse of Ki mitzvah. This mitzvah, which I command you this day, is not hidden from you and it's not far away. What mitzvah are we talking about? The mitzvah of Teshuvah. So the mitzvah of Teshuvah is a healing agent. It's so powerful that it can rectify for all the other mitzvahs. It is a distinct mitzvah above the 612 and all the offshoots other mitzvahs because Teshuvah can heal for all of them, whatever was caused by the disruption in any of the other ones. Now we see also part of why that's so important is because if a person transgresses, this entity that was created is going to hover around them. It's going to cause problems for them. So it's not just that we've disrupted the ecological spiritual system, it's also that you've got the swarming gnats of transgression that hover around a person and will follow them, even past this life. So we want to get rid of all of it, wipe it away like a cloud, as it says in the prophets. Now, how do we do that? Action to undo action, emotion to undo emotion. Because an action created a body and entity, so we have to undo it through an action. Really, we'd have to relive the situation. How do you really prove to me that you've come back? How do you really prove to me that you're never going to go there again? Put you in the same situation, and you have to either grab your chance to do the mitzvah that you missed, or prove that you could withhold from doing the transgression. That's how it should really work. But God in His mercy says the movement of the lips of confession will be enough of an action to undo the body. You don't necessarily have to relive the situation. Pleasure that was felt, emotion, will be undone through the deep remorse and regret. So it doesn't mean that all day long someone has to be walking around feeling like a piece of garbage, but when it's time for the tshuva process, the feeling of regret, that sinking, unwanted feeling is necessary for the process. That eventually brought us to the verse from Yeshaya. I am he who erases your transgressions. For my sake and your sins I will not remember. Why is it I is I? Two levels of Anochi, two levels of I. It's speaking about the level, what we call Keser. Keser is a crown, and it's a level above the 10 attributes. Same way a crown goes atop a head. What are the two levels of Keser? The two levels of Keser are what we call Ratzon and Tainug. Ratzon, which is will and desire, and Tainug, which is delight. A very simplified way of seeing this is that is the level wherein God wants us more than the mitzvos. Because the mitzvos, we saw, are connected to the 10 attributes. We're not going to the level above the 10 attributes. The level where God decides that He delights in creation, thereby He wants creation, thereby He creates creation. All that is a simultaneous, instantaneous process for God. Us, we have to break it down to see how it works. Let's say there's someone, whatever sort of relationship you have with them, but there's somebody that you really enjoy being with. I really enjoy being with them. Thereby, you want to be with them. I would like to find more opportunities to hang out with them. I enjoy being with you, thereby I want to be with you, and then Fin. How does that look? We're going to do stuff that's going to connect us, that's going to draw us together. I'm going to refrain from doing anything that's going to separate us, that's going to cause a rift in the relationship. I will stick with you through thick and thin. I will acknowledge, I will be grateful for you, etc., 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 all these other things. If a person transgresses, they mess up on the level where all the actions come in. As in doing certain things that will draw us together, refraining from stuff that's going to separate us. That's where we messed up. To rectify that, I got to go to the level above that. And the level above that is like, hey God, remember how much you delight in our existence? That's the level that's above the mitzvos. As in, that's the level you're going to more of the core of something. It's not exactly the same thing, but remember we have the story of the Alter Rebbe that says, I don't want your Gan Eden, I don't want your world to come, I only want you alone. Let's get away all the other quote-unquote distractions. Let's move everything else away and let's only focus you and me together. There's a bump in the relationship. Let's just sit down and have a coffee together. We don't even need to have a coffee. Let's just sit, you and me, in a quiet place together. You're going back to the bare basics of something, because the bare basics is the core of something. Let's remember how much we enjoy each other's company. And when we can do that, then eventually other things can follow. So when we're trying to rectify at the level of Kesser, that's the level that we're going to. Like, remember God, yes, you created the world and the mitzvos are supposed to be done in the world. That's why you created the world. And the mitzvos draw down the light that enlivens the world, etc. If we messed up there, remember that you only created the world for the mitzvos to be done so that we could do the mitzvos. Remember you wanted us to be the ones doing this. Remember how much you enjoy us. That's where we're going. That's a simplified kind of version of where we're going with this. Now, looking deeper at these two levels, we have the level of will is what we call Arch Anpin. That's the level of the source of the emanations. It's the outer aspect. It's actually the lower aspect. The higher level is Atik Yemin. The lowest aspect of the emanator. It's also the inner aspect, and that's delight. Because delight is the core of something, and the will is the expression of the delight. Something causes me delight, causes me pleasure, thereby I want it. Inner and outer kind of idea. Atik Yemin is from the language of removed from the days. What does it mean removed from the days? Removed from the days as in the 6 attributes which are the building blocks of creation. And each day of creation, a different one of these attributes manifested in that creation. Like the first day is chesed. Chesed is light and water. Water we know is chesed. We know it's the right side. It just flows and just gives. And light, of course, it's kindness and all these things. Atik is totally removed from it, as in it's above the level of creation. Archan is where creation could come about. So Atik, it's too high for creation, too great of a light for creation. So it copies itself over into Arich, which is now the source level. We're sort of referring to it as the stem cell level because that's the source matter for everything. And only from there, you start moving away from there, now things can start taking more distinct forms. So basically, when we do a mitzvah, we draw down the light of the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light, we draw it down through the bridge level, which is level of Kesser, into the attributes. If someone does what they're not supposed to do, then the light gets disrupted and that energy goes somewhere else. The thing though is that if a person misses an opportunity, either to draw down the light or they mess up, that moment can't be relived because time moves in one direction in this world. So how are we supposed to rectify if I can't go back to fix that situation? Again, that's part of why we have to go to levels above creation. And how does it work? Atik, which is a light that's too bright to be taken in. That's why it's called an enveloping light, encompassing light. Kind of like the way the sun just shines indiscriminately and everything and anything. It doesn't moderate itself. So the slide of Atik is so bright that when we draw down the slide that's so bright, the cockroaches have to scatter. Can't deal with it. Run away from the bright light! So the negative forces, we're not cutting them off from the nurture. Stop feeding off of this. Go away. Too bright of a light they can handle. And then Archan Pin, well, the source of the emanations is the source matter to come down to remedy what was messed up. How do you do that? By digging deep. The same way that if a river dries up, you got to dig deep to get a new water source. How does that look? We see that with the word of Teshuvah, which is Tush of Hay, returning the Hay. The latter Hay, the second Hay of the name of Avaya, that is the Hay with breath, the divine soul, those breathed into us, etc. Hay, you could spell it out, the letter, with a Hay and a Yud. Hay being Bina, which is understanding, and Yud being Chachma. Point of something versus the expansion of the idea. If a person transgresses, and they're now embarking on this Teshuvah process, how does this all work? How do we reach these levels? So a person has to sit now, once they realize, oh man, I really messed up over here. I really feel like garbage for having done that. Now a person sits and contemplates and meditates, not just on what they did wrong, but against whom you did wrong. Think about, it's not a matter of what you did, it's a matter that you did it to me. That's where the problem is. Certain things that I ask you to do this for me, the action is less important than the fact that I'm the one who asked it of you, and whatever our relationship is. Whatever the asking, that's just an expression of what our relationship is. The real point of it is the relationship that you and I have. So it's not just that you did, the point is that you did it against me. I thought we weren't at that level. I thought we were beyond that. We were past that. So when a person sits and contemplates, it's not just, oh, whatever transgression they did. It's who did you sin against? I sinned against God, and all the knowledge that we have of God, that we learn about God, or can contemplate about God. Father, source of everything, merciful, kind, etc., etc., etc. And then you're like, I really messed up. But through that contemplation and thinking about it, who did you sin against? That now is going to allow a person to dig deeper, to get to that level of chachma, place where that ego, where the hidden love is. You're going to dig into the deeper recesses of your heart and soul. You're really going to get more in touch with your true self, the true core of the self, the core truth of the self. Thereby, you dug deeper, and now it could draw closer, even closer than what a mitzvah would have brought me to God. Because the mitzvahs are operating on a certain level, I have to go to a level above that to draw closer, which eventually brings us to the level of Adam Kadmon, which is the primeval man, all of creation is realized at the same time. That's where ultimately we're drawing down from. Wow, this seems like such an incredible process that we're going through, but remember, this mitzvah is not hidden from you, it's not far from you, it's not in the heavens, and it's not across the sea. These levels, which seem so sublime and so wondrous and so far away, for you specifically, they're not far from you. Mimcha, they're not far. You can access them, you can effectuate exactly what they could do. Because ultimately, you also come from this ultimate higher level, and you could draw it down. And that brought us to what we see in the Amidah prayer, where we say, Slach lanu avinu kechatanu, forgive us our Father for we sinned. That's why you should be asking for forgiveness. That's not a reason why I should forgive you. Why is it a reason for forgiving? Because what comes first? Return us, bring us back to you in wholehearted repentance. When I have processed the process correctly, now I'm saying forgive us because I've sinned. Now I'm asking for forgiveness. This whole process of the fact that I stumbled or I tripped and messed up and I'm coming back to you has brought me closer. That is why I'm asking for your forgiveness. I'm doing this process. I'm now closer to you. Please forgive me for that. Which brought us to the idea about how a Baal Tshuva, someone who does Teshuvah, is on a higher level than a tzaddik. Because a person messed up, you can't go back to that moment. I asked you to do something, you missed the chance. Or you messed up the chance. We can't go back there anymore. How am I supposed to rectify this? I have to go to a higher level. Where's that higher level? Not just the will that was there, this that I want you to do, but I have to go to the source of the wanting. And thereby draw down a whole new will. So you talk about a greater light, a brighter light. But none of that could have happened without the mess up to begin with. Someone goes through a rough patch in the relationship. When we fix that rough patch, we are now at a closer point than we were before. Even in just in a simple sense. If a kid messes up, oh, you better be on good behavior, so you have to be on extra good behavior. So here, because we have to go even higher, that brings us even closer to God. But that only happened because of the mess up, which is part of how the mess up, that what was once the impediment for us, what was the transgression, now becomes a merit for us. Because that is what drew us closer to God. And a tzaddik, a righteous person, can't stand in that same place because he never went through that process. He stayed at the place, the levels of the Mitzvas Vidui, 10 attributes, but for him, everything was perfect and whole. So he never messed it up. So you can say, oh, but it sounds like a good idea to mess up and then draw closer. But we don't want to risk the mess up. The mess up is not a good thing that happened. So yes, ultimately a person could come much higher from that, but we don't want to go there. Oh, in order for us to be closer friends, let's have a fight and mess up the relationship. That's a terrible idea. Don't do that. So the tzaddik doesn't do that. He doesn't go there. So in this particular regard, because the person messed up, they thereby go higher. The tzaddik is not at that level because he never messed up to begin with. How could that happen? Because remember, the transgressions actually come from a higher level. That's when we talk about the world of Toh and Tikkun, the world of chaos, the fixing world that comes in afterwards. Same way that the higher bricks in the wall fall lower. That's why Torah prohibits certain things, not because it's evil, terrible, that also, but certain things that are just don't go there is because we cannot elevate them in this world. Why? Because they come from a place that's higher, that's beyond our capacities. But when a person commits a transgression, they went to what we weren't supposed to be messing around with. Ultimately, when that will be your pathway to Teshuvah, you end up in a higher place. That's why we see also that Teshuvah, as the healing agent, Teshuvah is like medicine. Medicine is not good for a healthy person. A healthy person is not supposed to have medicine. You're supposed to eat good and healthy, clean foods. If a person is sick, however, that means that there's a disruption in the system. There's an anomaly here because a person is not fully healthy. aka someone transgressed. They only need a little bit of medicine to bring them back. You don't go, oh, just keep eating your regular diet, everything's fine. No, we need something to boost you. A little bit of medicine will do more than just all the regular foods. And it talks about also how, because the word of God and that medicine and that curative is much stronger than it is in the other foods. We don't necessarily want to be having it, but if the time comes that a person has to have it, then it's much stronger than what the standard procedure is. Which connects to the idea of Teshuvah, that we don't want to have Teshuvah. Well, we can always try to draw closer to God, even without transgression, but Teshuvah that's brought about through transgression, we don't necessarily want to have it, but when there's a disruption to the system, it ends up being something more powerful. So that's the whole thing about how the process works. Now that we know this, let's emphasize the most important part of all is that Teshuvah is only possible in this world. This is a world where things can change. This is a world where things are not fully defined yet. And not just that, Teshuvah is so powerful that even in an instant, something can change completely. And that's why we saw the two examples of someone who betroths a woman and says, we are betrothed on the condition that I'm a tzaddik, and that person, a minute before and a minute after is a Russia. But if that moment he had a powerful thought of Teshuvah, that's enough to say, okay, this is a valid condition for this betrothal. Then we also saw the story of Rebbe Elazar ben Durdaya, who basically sleeping with all the prostitutes to the extent that it was idolatry for him, that he had to go and sleep with all of them, which is why ultimately he passed away from his Teshuvah. That was necessary for him, even though that's not necessarily the standard procedure. But it's not just that. In his moment of Teshuvah, it was so complete, such a high level of Teshuvah, that not only does he get the world to come, but he's called Rabbi Elazar ben Durdaya. First of all, we see how awesome it is. He wasn't looking for Teshuvah, and yet something jolted him so much that he got there. That was enough to totally rectify for him. This radical, powerful aspect of Teshuvah is only possible in this world. Because after this world, a soul is not bound anymore by Torah mitzvahs. In the world to come, there's no accounting, there's no deed, no reckoning. As the Zohar says, you can't say, oh, I'll ask for mercy in the world to come. No, up there everything is defined. Down here is the world where things can change. That's how we saw that the Tzemech Tzedek quotes the Maamar of the Rebbe, just to give us a very brief specific point of it, talking about how the world to come is a world that stems from Gevura. Gevura might, but it's a world of definition. It's a world that specifically you could see godliness because it's been mitzamtzin, because it has contraction. Specifically specifically by putting the godliness into a particular kind of containment is how we could experience it. You need to have the both parts of it. So yes, godliness is clearer, but it's also a more defined kind of godliness. Versus in this world, where we can't necessarily see godliness, that's because it's a world of chesed. The world of kindness, everything is in flux. It means that anything can happen. There's no specific definition. There's not a specific containment. That led us to the idea of how do you see this as a world of kindness, because a small movement down here has massive repercussions up above. Either in a good sense, so if someone does a mitzvah, you do a relatively small action down here, and the spiritual light that gets brought down and the spiritual repercussions are just massive beyond what we can even imagine. On the flip side of it is that a little bit, comparatively, relatively speaking, a little bit of suffering down here makes up for what would be much greater suffering in the next world. Why? Because it's a world of kindness. We only need a small contribution for you for it to have massive effects. And then we ended off last time with the story from Psachim that Rav Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, they thought he was going to die. He seemed to be at death's door. He went up there. He saw what's going on in the higher realms. And they said, what did you see? He said, I saw an opposite world. People that we think are important down here are not so important up there. People that we think are not so important down here are much more important up there. His father said to him, you didn't see an opposite world. You saw a clear world. Olam Baru Isa. Baru, that it was clear, clarified, as in you saw a defined world. You saw a definitive world. This is the way it is. There's not room for flux there anymore. And that's why the word of Baru, which is clear, you saw the clear world, it's related to the world of birur, which is the word of refinement. Our job in this world is to refine the world. To talk about the elevation of the sparks. You have to go find all the sparks that fell from the world of Torah. We have to go and elevate all of it. Our job in this world is to sift through the coarse materiality of this world and refine it into something more spiritual. Here, part of the flux is that we could go around and we can make this happen. Up there, everything is set. It's defined. The plaster has dried. There's no changing the mold anymore. And then we see that example also when we speak about stem cells. We see that also in the creation of a person. That each limb of the human body is a distinct entity. Here's your hand, your leg, whatever. One cannot be made into the other. So your head can't become your foot. Once you're born, your head is your head, your foot is your foot. The original drop, however, contains all limbs. So at this level, a foot can be a head. As in, when you talk about the original point of conception, the original DNA packaging of the child that the father gives to the mother, that original point, anything can be anything. There's no definition in that. There's just possibility. There's just potential. Before a child starts to take form, just part of like the way the idea of stem cells are, just in a simplified format, is that anything can be anything. Our world is in flux. That's related now to our world. That our world is like that initial point where anything can be anything. Our world is in flux, unrefined. As the work of refining the fallen sparks of Tohu, ultimate good here, intermingled with evil, is the entire purpose of the 6,000 years of existence. Remember how we learned from the Gemara that the world is going to be around for 6,000 years? Here what's talking about is that our world is in flux. It's an unrefined world, as in it's a not definite world. Our job is to actually bring definition to it in the sense of clarifying the holiness of it. Make this holy. We have now elevated it to something more specific. When it talks about the world of refining the fallen sparks of Tohu, remember we spoke about the world of Tohu, which is the world of chaos, the world that precedes the world that we're in now. That's the world of two bright vessels. The light couldn't be contained, so everything exploded. Then you have a showering of sparks in this world, and our job is to refine all of those sparks, to go and elevate these fallen aspects of holiness. These sparks of holiness that got scattered throughout the world. That's what our job is, to go and elevate them. How do I know which are my sparks to elevate? Well, wherever you end up, do something Jewish, say a blessing, praise God, etc., and you will elevating your slice of life kind of idea. Part of that is that in this world, everything being in flux, is we have a much more gray zone. We have gray matter. Good and evil are intermingled. Permitted and forbidden are not necessarily so clear. In the world to come, everything is defined, it's clear. Here it's not necessarily. Our job is to go and take all this gray matter, called klipa, the shell. Is it something that's positive or not? Depends on how we use it. Our job is to go and take all these things and extract the good from it, as in elevate it, make it something holy. Just to get technical here, these low fallen sparks are from the name of Ban, which is the source of Ishtalshalus. It can be refined through the name of Ma, which is an encompassing light separate from Ishtalshalus. Ishtalshalus is the chain of creation. You remember these names, Ma and Ban. That's when we saw different ways of adding up the name of Havaya. When you have different kind of fillings, you can get the name of 45 and the name of 52, which are father and mother, Ma and Ban. Anyway, that's going back to that, these two levels. The potential of Ma to accomplish this refinement comes from Hashem's infinite light of Chachma, the sphere associated with Havaya. As Ma is encompassing, the light is great and immense from the level of Ein Sof. The low fallen sparks can be refined through Havaya with the milui of Ma. Refined sparks from Ban. So refined, what is refined, comes from a higher level than the refiner. So what do we mean by that? First we have this verse from Mishlei, Proverbs. Havaya b'chachma yasad aretz, kane shemayim b'sfuna. Havaya in wisdom, Havaya b'chachma, founded the earth, established the heavens with discernment. The name of Ma means what? Is associated with Chachma. This goes all the way back from the first things that we learned in Tanya. Chachma is kochma, the potential of what? As in the potential of nothingness, the potential for anything. When you say what is it? That means it's a blank slate there. Anything can be filled in over there. Here, when we talk about Chachma, remember it's a place above ego, which by definition means that the negative forces can't be there, because also by definition, the negative forces have egos in the sense of self. I am a something. When you're standing at the pinpoint of wisdom, that initial spark of something, there is no I there. That's part of how the hidden love is there. It is not touched because it's there. This is the level that we use for refining the fallen sparks. What is the level of the fallen sparks? That's the level of bond. So just know one aspect of God's name will elevate the other aspect of God's name. Like a wall, what was higher falls lower. So it seems like, how does this whole system work? Whatever's going to go around to do the refining, the power that we have to refine it is coming from one level, and it's going to find something that actually came from a higher level. The encompassing light of Ma is very great and immense, from the level of Ein Sof. Ein Sof is infinite light. When we say an encompassing light of Ma, we mean a light that can't be contained. The light of Ma, as in this light which cannot be contained, is very great and immense. It comes from the level of God's infinity. Ein Sof without end. Ein Sof is all powerful, without limit to his power of refinement or ability to transform evil into good. Thereby, Ein Sof can bring about fundamental change, transforming a foot into a head. Ki kame kachashecha ka'ara. For before him, darkness is as light. And we also have from Tehillim, we've seen this verse. Gam choshech lo yachshech mimeka v'laila kayom ya'ir kachashecha ka'ora. Even darkness will not obscure anything from you, and the night will light up like day. As darkness, so is the light. The light of the name Ma is infinite, so it's not bound by the limits of creation and can modify existence as desired. Thus, it can refine anything in this world. In regard to divine service, this means the enlivening sparks within sin can be transformed into merit. So we went through a whole thing about how what was once a negative, what was once your pitfall, is now going to become like a benefit to you, a merit to you, because it led you on this whole path of Teshuvah. It's a little bit seeing the mechanics of it. How is that possible? We have these two names of God that are operating. And this one name of God, this name of Ma, where is it drawing from? It's drawing from God's infinity. What's the thing about infinity? Infinity, anything is anything in infinity. There's no limitation to it. There's no saying, oh, you can only do this. Infinity is infinity. And that's why it brings the example of that darkness is as light and darkness is not obscure, etc. Because anything is infinity. Not just that, because anything is anything, that means anything can become anything. There's a potential for anything to happen within infinity because it's infinite. There's no limitation to it. And then just to get a little bit more specific about that, we have the story from Tana. This is a story from the Gemara. The Gemara relates that one Shabbat evening, Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa saw that his daughter was sad. He said to her, my daughter, why are you sad? She said to him, I confused a vessel of vinegar for a vessel of oil, and I lit the Shabbat lamp with vinegar. Soon the lamp will be extinguished and will be left in the dark. Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa sees his daughter sad. Hey, what's up? I realized I lit this whole thing, girl. And the lights are going to go out. In the days before electricity, in the days before cell phone, there goes the Shabbos lights. He said to her, my daughter, what are you concerned about? He who said to the oil that it should burn can say to the vinegar that it should burn. Misha amar l'shaman v'yidlok, hu yomar lachometz v'yidlok. Atana taught that lamp burned continuously the entire day until they brought from it light for Abdullah. He doesn't just say, oh, God could perform a miracle and anything can happen and maybe we'll have a menorah again kind of thing. He said, no. The same point where God said that oil will burn is the same aspect that can make vinegar burn. It's the same thing to it. One's not different from the other. It's the potential for anything to be anything. According to the laws of nature, from light that is mamalik al-ulmin, certain substances ignite and burn readily and others cannot. When you talk about the individualized life force that we all have, we call mamalik al-ulmin versus Soviet common, the encompassing surrounding light. When it's something specific, it could only be what is particular to you, or whatever is particular to whatever entity it's in. That is very defined kind of light. Which means that, according to that law, this burns, this doesn't burn. This burns, this doesn't burn. When, however, Hashem desires, he can suspend the laws of nature and reveal light that is Soviv Kolam. Soviv Kolam means encompassing world. Why do we say that? Not just because it's like a holographic glow or whatever. We say that because it means that it can't be contained, resulting in phenomena contrary to the regular patterns of existence. From Tehillim, we say, Nhala, who transformed the rock into a pond of water, the flint into a fountain of water. When we operate within the laws of nature, when we operate at the level where things are more specific and defined, then everything can only be whatever it's been made to be. But we go to a level that's higher than that, then the potential for anything can happen. Darkness and light, it's all the same. There's no difference between it. Oil burning, vinegar burning, there's no difference. This is the power that we're drawing down that allows Teshuvah to radically change everything. Because otherwise, especially if we be in the world to come, it would be like, no, righteous sinner, and that's all there is to it. The righteous could go straight to the reward, and the sinner has to go through the cleansing process, and then they could go to whatever reward they get. Down here in this world, anything can be anything. The world in flux, I'm so radical, so powerful, this light that we're drawing down, it's a light that can turn something totally into something else. It seems like, oh wow, this is such a wondrous thing. It's like, wow, this is such an incredible thing, but not when you realize where we're drawing from. When you realize that we're drawing from the ultimate, it's no difference. It makes no difference up there. So when a child is still a drop in the womb, it has the power to divide into 248 limbs and 365 sinews, forming a body with a head and feet, a potential that can be divided anyway. Going back to the whole creation of the child thing. And we always say the 240 limbs, 365 sinews, it relates like 248 are the positive commandments, 365 are the prohibitive commandments. They don't exactly count up, like if you take an anatomy textbook, you wouldn't exactly be able to count it up in 248 and 365 the way you think. There is a count up for it, but not like that. But the point is that in that original conception moment, any part of it could be anything. Similarly, the power of growth invested in the earth can result result in beautiful fruit being set apart from a good or bad seed sowed within it. In Bereshis, when God's creating the world, it says, V'yomer Elokim, remember Elokim is the name of nature, V'yomer Elokim tache aretz desha, esam vazria zera, eitz pri osa, pri lemina, asher zara vo, ala arts v'yichein. And Hashem said, let the earth sprout vegetation, seed yielding herbs and fruit trees producing fruit according to its kind, in which its seed is found on the earth, and it was so. God said, let the earth sprout forth, etc. God planted into the earth the power of growth. If I show you an apple seed, and you're like, where the hell is the apple tree in that apple seed? It doesn't make sense. Not just that, but the seed has to rot in the ground before an apple tree could grow. That makes even less sense. It's not the seed that has the power of growth. It's the earth that has the power of growth. To the extent that in that moment of planting, I could plant a bad seed and somehow get a beautiful fruit tree out of it. I could also plant a good tree and somehow not get anything from it. Because the possibility, the potential for anything to be anything is in that initial moment. Until something actually starts to grow and then there's something that's actually more definitive. Our perception of things is kind of being flipped. Because we see things here and like, oh, everything seems to have a definition here. Like, I see what objects and stuff is. Think of the spiritual realm. Things don't have form and matter and entity. What do you mean by that? But we're talking about this spiritual aspect of what is and what isn't is less defined down here than it is up there, which is why this is a world where change can happen. To the extent that someone who seems to be an ultimate sinner, a Rabbi Elazar ben Dordai who's sleeping with every prostitute, to the extent that it's like an idolatry for him, he can have an absolute turnaround through Teshuvah. This is from Shar Yechad Be'emunah, so it's Tanya. It is written, forever God, your word stands firm in the heavens. The Baal Shem Tov of blessed memory has explained this concept at length and made it widely known. This means that your word which you uttered, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. These very words and letters through which the heavens were created stand firmly forever within the firmament of heaven and are forever clothed within all the heavens to give them life. As it is written, and the word of Elokeinu shall stand firm forever. And his words live and stand firm forever. We've spoken about this before. The idea that it's not just that God spoke the heavens into existence, but the actual letters that spoke the heaven into existence are still there holding it, keeping it in existence. This refers not only to those creations such as the heavenly firmament which enjoy a permanent existence, but also to those creatures which perish as individuals, with only their species continuing to exist. Not just that the heavens stand forever, but even things that live and die. In all instances, the divine life force which created a particular creature must constantly be vested within it, incessantly creating and vivifying it anew. The divine spark, the divine word that brings something to existence must remain within it for it to always be in existence, however long it's going to be in existence for. For if the creative letters were to depart even for an instant, God forbid, and return to their source, the degree of godliness from whence they emanate, all the heavens would become naught and absolute nothingness, and would be as though they had never existed at all. Exactly as before the utterance, let there be a firmament. So not slow CGI goneness, just nothing. Just absolute nothingness if God's word would leave. Just part of how anything that exists has to have God's word to keep it in existence, whether it's something that we see as good or something that we see as not good. God has to be bringing it to existence for it to be existing. And so it is with all created things, in all the upper and lower worlds, and even this physical earth and the realm of the completely inanimate. So even the earth that God put this power of growth into it must continually have this power that God puts into it for it to have the power of growth. Wrapping up the Maamar, this story that we just saw, let he who said that oil shall burn, say vinegar shall burn, referencing this, he who spoke and drew down the pattern of letters which give oil power to burn, as in create a pattern within the natural order, can also say vinegar should have the power to burn, creating a different system of nature. As in, God, whose word creates everything, that he gave oil the power to burn, can give anything the power to burn. He could also decide that it's natural for vinegar to burn. This is possible because the physical world has yet to be refined, and the light of Sovav Kalaman, this surrounding encompassing light, as in the light that cannot be individualized, drawn and contained, which brings about refinement, rests within. This aspect of godliness is actually what dominates. In this world, anything can happen. Anything can be. And not in some sort of far-fetched fantasy realm, but in just the simple logic, natural process of things. As in, because things are not fully defined, anything can be in anything in this world. Through Teshuvah, a person accesses this light and thereby the potential for radical change. How can Teshuvah create such a radical, instantaneous change? Because we are drawing from this power, from this aspect of godliness, drawing down through it means that anything can be in anything. And you could change something completely. The same way that oil could burn and vinegar could burn, etc. The same way a person who seems to have gone off on a totally wrong, negative action or path can be totally turned around. We saw the power of Teshuvah, but it's very specifically this world. So we want to inspire to get to the point that we should be in a constant state of drawing closer to God. The world to come is from Mimal Kol Amen. It's an individualized, defined light. So it's already sorted. Alam Baru, you saw a refined world, a clear world. So it's already sorted, refined, like a child that's grown or an apple from a seed. The creative power is much greater than what's created. We're ending off with the final mind-blowing thing. The creative power is much greater than what's created. Because once something's created, it is what it is at that point. But the potential is much more powerful than what it finally becomes. becomes. The creative power, when something is those initial stages where anything can be, that's a very high energy, light level that's in operation. But once something actually becomes something, you've now defined a very specific aspect, and this is what it is. So all that potential is not there anymore because now it is a something. So the creative power is much more powerful than what eventually becomes created. So at that point, you just have to sustain what's already been created, but you don't have the potential for anything to happen anymore. When you plant the seed in the ground, it's almost like a Schrodinger's cat thing, but on a way higher level. When you plant the seed in the ground, anything can happen. The initial conception of a child, anything could be. The child could be anything. We have no idea what it's going to look like. We have no idea which part is going to become which part. But once it's been created, once a child is born, it's like, well, there's definition now. Once the seed becomes a tree, becomes an apple, we know exactly what the apple is. Now it just has to be sustained, but it doesn't have to have the potential for creation anymore because it's been created at this point. So that's why at that point, it's actually a lower level than the point that came above it. Here in this world, yes, it's a world of much physicality, etc., but there's actually a greater potential in this world because at this world, anything can happen, anything can change. Once formed, the divine energy is limited to maintaining existence and no longer contains the power to transform a foot into a head. Once it is, you don't have to have the power for anything to be anything anymore. Now you just have to sustain whatever was created. Therefore, it's called Olam Bara, or a pure world, or a refined world. It's already fixed through the name of Ma, so ray and radiance from the attributes of Gur and Tzimtzum is revealed, greater yet less accessible light, but not the essence of Ma. Thus, Tshuva is ineffective in that world. Why does Tshuva not work in that world? Because it's the world that's been refined. All this process of Ma that's being drawn down, etc. So sure, I can see it, but I can only see it because it's been contracted, because it's been defined and it's been given a container. Versus anything can be anything aspect. Going back to what we saw from Koheles and the Zohar quoted this, in that realm there's no counsel, wisdom, or understanding to save him from judgment. If a person departs this world with soiled garments, quote unquote, he can no longer correct for his actions through Tshuva must undergo cleansing. You should have washed up before you got here. It's too late now. In this world, however, proper Teshuvah awakens the light of Soviv, fixing his situation entirely. In this world, you don't just cleanse, you can transform totally. And it ends off with this bracha of Hashem, Yachazreinu b'Teshuvah shalem l'fanav, ki hu rotza b'Teshuvah. May Hashem cause us to return to him in complete Teshuvah, for he desires Teshuvah. Amen. Ken Yiratzon, so may it be. Great class, everyone. Great class.